Inform TV, we're in the mayor's office in Moorhead, Minnesota. Your Honor, introduce yourself today and tell us about yourself and give you some your thoughts on governance in the city of Moorhead and in this part of the state of Minnesota.
Sure. My name is Delray Williams. I am a retired CPA. I retired about 5 years before I actually ran, and so I spent time volunteering in a variety of things. And so I was pretty active in my community before I decided to run. It was a last-minute decision. I hate regrets, and I thought it would be a regret. So the last day of filing, I signed up, and I had a lot of personal support, so I wouldn't recommend doing it at the last minute because you really have to kind of be on the fly. But it was a really good experience for me, and it still is.
So did you have to first then face a primary to get whittled down, or
No, you basically fill out a form and give them $5.
Oh, okay.
That's how simple it was.
And you're 4 years into your term already, is that right?
I'm in my 4th year. I have a year and a half left. It's normally a 4-year term because we shifted in that same election from odd year elections to even year elections, and so they decided to elongate it by 1 year.
Now my audience is going to wonder a little bit. I believe Moorhead is the biggest city in the 7th Congressional District by far.
Yep.
And at the same time, we know Fargo is growing, but when I came in this morning, the east side, there's a bunch of development on the east side of Moorhead, so Moorhead must be growing too. Dilworth, is you kind of growing out to Dilworth?
Yeah, or they've grown to us
okay.
in that respect. Moorhead last decade actually did grow more than Fargo. 2000 to the 2010 census, we grew 18%, Fargo grew 16%.
Wow.
Now, but perspective-wise, and I think we're continuing that kind of a dynamic, but so far in this decade, we've grown about 18%. So, and we have a number of years left. So I think we will have grown quite a bit. And so a lot of what we do has to do with managing growth effectively so that you do what we need to do, but you do it in the most efficient, effective way as possible. And so I think that takes up a lot of what we're doing specifically this year. We've started to do strategic planning, which involves also facility planning. So we had a huge report on all the things that are in some way owned by the city and what their needs are in a more immediate and a long-term way. We did a big study of what debt we have, because with growth you usually get a certain degree of debt, but instead of paying interest on debt, you want to make sure you manage that really effectively, don't let it get out of hand. Growth, we want to know when do we need to broaden our borders. And not that we're looking so hard at it, but there are people that are at the edge of our borders that are wondering when that will happen. And so we want to make sure that we do it in the most efficient way. And for us, we can find that 2030 is when we really need to, because we want to do our infill, our infrastructure first. We don't want to be sprawling. That's not effective use of money.
When it comes to growth, do you consume townships on the edge of town, or is there another city on your border other than Dilworth that affects that growth spectrum?
Townships is what would be the scoop, and so we wanted to make sure to see what kind of time frame that would be. A lot of owners in the townships have expressed some interest. And so we want to give them an idea of when that might be and what time frame we would have to have some good discussion with that township. And because it's 2030, really there's ample time, to do that, and they can choose to join us or not join us. frankly. It would take, I think, a vote on the township to want to be a part of that.
Now, your city and the city of Fargo, the Fargo-Moorhead area is well known for the flooding situation.
Yep.
And yet the Moorhead side has pretty well addressed that, hasn't they? Haven't
You know, we talk about that in that we've done a lot of work towards it, but the interesting thing about that is, and I'm very, very pleased with the council and the mayor at the time, because 2009 was a surprise to us. Fargo was dealing with it for many, many years, but we are about 4 feet higher, and so our relationship was usually in helping them, and then maybe a little bit on our north side, which wasn't at the time part of Moorhead, but now is. And so we, at that time, did quite a bit. We did not do eminent domain on homes, so there's about 80 of them that we would need to get to finish up to make it seamless.
Your dike system.
In our dike system. And so, and I think there's about 9 that want to sell right now, so we'll kind of do it in that kind of a way. But the ones that chose not to, they know that in a circumstance that we need to, we would have to sort of clay dike them out in a way to save the city.
So when we look at the state of Minnesota, I think Governor Dayton's position, and what is the city, your council members and your county commissioners in this part of Clay County, are you guys pro the diversion plan or neutral, or don't think we need a big diversion plan on the North Dakota side?
I think the city and the county have maybe one person that are against it, the rest are all for it. So we have become we are actually part of the Diversion Authority.
Okay.
And when I first came in, I listened to both sides, and you know, it's not a bad guy, good guy kind of thing, as we sometimes try to do it. It's very complicated, and people would be hurt. I always stress that it's not all about saving the city and we don't care about anybody else. I recognize that there would be about 6 homes in Wilkin County that would be affected by the diversion, but I have 820 homes that would be without it in Moorhead, and so I know there needs to be more flood protection. The part that I think that really shifted me right away was the realization that I think the Corps is going to do it one way or the other.
Okay.
And if Moorhead is not, and this is for me personally,
Sure.
Everyone has their own things, but for Minnesota people to not be a part of the deciding how the mitigation works, they will go by their minimum federal rules. And because we are involved, the mitigation rules that they're considering are not only above federal, they're above Minnesota's, because Governor Dayton had asked that they do a more expanded way, and they listened to that. And so I think that's important. So if the lawsuit goes through, and it goes through fairly rapidly, the Corps will move forward quickly. They've already started work on their own without having the Diversion Authority a part of that. And the only thing that will stop that will be litigation.
My audience would be wondering, 16 to 18% growth is tremendous.
Yeah.
What are you a bedroom community for manufacturing and the actual jobs on the North Dakota side, or are you getting manufacturing and jobs on an 18% basis on the Minnesota side as well? They'll wonder about that.
You know, I have not quantified how much we've grown in that area, but we are growing. Our second industrial park is actually at its peak right now, and so we're trying to figure out how to expand it in the most effective way right now. And so they're working on the numbers, so I haven't seen them yet, but we are at a point where it's expanded beyond its capacity. But we do have American Crystal Sugar is based out of here. We have a large malting plant. We have a number of industrial things in Moorhead itself, too. But yeah, we like to pride ourselves in being a good community to live in.
Okay.
And so if that's what makes us a bedroom community, I guess that could be it. But we are really a self-contained city all by yourself. Except I would say all the media seems to be over on the Fargo side.
Okay. And from a standpoint of looking at various avenues as far as what has your administration or your term, 5 years, what would you feel that you have brought to the city?
Well, there's a few things. Before I went on, and frankly, a key reason why I ran, there was a lot of drama, a lot of city council fighting, and I think none of us like seeing that. It's not that you can't disagree, but it's how you do it. And so once you start getting personal about it, nobody does it in a way that's logical. And as an accountant, I like logic. I want us to think it out in sort of a way that makes sense and not get caught up in, I'm angry with this person and I'm not going to vote for your thing. And so I think that was one thing that changed right away. Secondly, I wanted citizens to feel like they were part of it. And so I did some things on my own. I do some articles I write. I know a regular couple coffees, which seems sort of ridiculous in some respects. It's sort of like having a woman come in and you have like, let's sit down for pie and coffee or something. But it's an opportunity that people always know that they can connect and talk with me. I have a pretty strong social media presence because I want people to be able to connect with me.
So are you
whenever
like
they
the
have
president,
any
a
kind of
tweeter,
question.
or how do you communicate that way?
I do tweet, but I do most of mine through Facebook. People know that they can message me and probably hear back. Well, they'll hear back for sure that day, but according to Facebook, I'm less than an hour. And so if you have any questions or comments or any of those kinds of things, I try to be pretty easy to connect with.
What about as far as the politics, which you just brought up? People, my audience will say, boy, why don't we get that in all branches of government? Does the Fargo Moorhead area or the Moorhead Dilworth side here, is it a Republican area or is it a Democratic area? What about your own political leaning, or do you disclose that or don't you?
I suppose if people Google me, they would figure it out. But although there's a lot more stuff to Google to find now, I think when I ran, there was probably 3 pages of me just because I was active. But the community here is primarily a progressive community.
Okay.
It's surrounded by a fairly conservative district. District 7 is fairly conservative. But we have a couple colleges in here, so it's probably not that surprising. I do not involve myself in partisanship while I'm there.
Okay.
I have some degree in the past. Frankly, I've actually been both parties at one time in my life. Not at the same time.
So do you have easy access to Governor Dayton's ear as well as Doug Bergram's? Dayton more so than Bergram's, or has he been friendly to you and the city with his new administration, or haven't you had much contact with Doug?
I have met and chatted with Doug a few times. There's many things we do with North Dakota and Fargo that brings us in the same room, and but I don't feel like I have a great grasp of who he is.
Okay.
Quite. He's a pleasant gentleman. Governor Dayton, I have quite a bit more. In the very beginning, he involved me in some of his press releases, even had me talk at it, having to do with train safety, transportation. I have his phone number. I have called him on things that I think are important. He does listen. I've met with him a number of times. So he invited me to be one of his guests for his State of the States.
Okay.
So I think we get along fine. We don't always have the same viewpoint on some things, but that's not unusual.
On a state level right now, the representatives from Moorhead, both your senator and your representatives are Democrat right now, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
And at the same time, I'm sure my audience is wondering, at one point in time, to affect taxes and whatever, the state had given some of our border cities some tax breaks. Do you still have that? Do you have a lower gas tax or income tax or
a variety of things? For instance, there is a thing called the Mo Zone. Within 7 miles of the border,
okay,
the gas tax can't be more than 3 cents difference.
Okay.
So when and they bring it up every now and then about gas tax and about raising it, but it would not affect us here at all because we are at that 3 cent difference.
Okay.
We do get border states legislation and have for decades. That was one thing that got held up. So we hadn't had any since 2013, but this year we get another $3 million. So what it allows us to do is give some disparity credits having to do with some business type things.
So the businesses like the malting, American Crystal Sugar, and Artie Offit, I see he's got a big dealership on this side. Maybe he's got the same on the other side. But
he has a big one here. Yeah.
Do they end up paying a corporate tax rate at 9.8% like other Minnesota corporations, or is it 2% like they do in North Dakota or something like that?
Well, actually we brought in a gentleman about 2 years ago to do sort of a study on that. And North Dakota and Minnesota's corporate rates are pretty comparable.
Okay.
So for a big organization to come in, and that's why frankly Minnesota itself does have a lot of really big corporations in it. It's maybe not as known that it's pretty competitive to the rest of the United States as far as corporations go.
And as far as now, you've already announced, tell my audience what you told me coming in. When you ran, you said you were going to be a one-term mayor. Is that right?
I did. And I didn't make it a part of my election, but anybody asking, when you run for re-election, I go, no, I'm not. I see myself as 5 years. At the time I was running, I thought it would be 5 years when they did that. And I think 5 years is enough time to accomplish a lot of the things I want to do. Anything beyond that, I think you would lose sort of that spark of I can do it. You get kind of complacent. I've watched that many times. And when I'm done, I will go back to volunteering and like I did before, and except that I'll be a former mayor, so maybe I can do more things in that way. And frankly, I know a lot more people.
What about in the last legislative session, you as the mayor of a major outstate Minnesota city, do you feel they're still fighting a little bit, of course, with their constitutional thing, but I think everything is basically in place, any bonding authority. How did you come out? Were you satisfied with the session or not?
Yeah, we had a great session, and I admit I did 6 lobbying trips, and that's despite being in the hospital for 8 days at the end of January. And so I did have to kind of watch my pace a little bit, but we locally got a $43 million underpass bonding here that we've been working on for decades, frankly.
Explain what the underpass is.
On the streets 20 to 21, 20th Street turns into 21st, which is why we often call it 2021. And it goes, there's a double track there that's pretty active and got really active while
railroad tracks.
Railroad tracks.
Okay.
When North Dakota was really kicking butt as far as oil goes, it's slowed down since, but it's a huge safety issue right there. It goes right by our high school. It's a strange kind of a mixture where people sort of gun it through, and there's a lot of people walking, biking by that, and so it's a huge safety issue. And so we've been wanting to do an underpass there for some time. It's the city, long before me, had prepped the area. They moved things so that it was what you would call shovel ready.
Okay.
And so the funding for that, they had been trying to go through federal funds. And I want to say it was probably about 5 days before I became mayor, Castleton, North Dakota had a big explosion.
Yes, okay.
And which caught my eye, and even I think in February I went to DC to talk about water things, but I said I need to talk about trains while I'm there too. And it was a little bit after that that Governor Dayton did one of his rail safety listening tour things, and Moorhead was part of that. And I was telling him about our federal funding we were going for the 4th time for our Tiger grant, and he said he said to me, he said, I wouldn't go for federal funds, I would go for state funds. And I think I was mayor like 3 months then, and so I came back. I said, we need to go to the state for this. And so that's what's shifted that really fast. So he had it in his budget for the full amount, and $43 million is a lot.
Yes.
For an underpass that first year. And then, frankly, the state legislature just, as many people know, didn't really quite get their acts together for a couple of years. And so this last year, when they did do a bonding bill, we were easily in that.
So that'll start this fall yet, or they have
We-
to do more engineering work on it yet?
There's a little bit of tweaking that they need to still do. The funding doesn't start until after July, that we even have access to it. And then probably this fall we'll do the bidding process, and then so that we can be in time for the construction next year.
Was there anything else in the session that the city was heavily affected by here, or this part of the state?
Yeah, there was a number of them. Besides the border states legislation money, that was $3 million, which will let us do a lot of things. We had a TIF extension. The city and county had voted for a new a sales tax, which we usually don't do too much here, to fund a new jail and law enforcement center. We had the oldest jail in Minnesota, and they were sort of taking beds away from us because it wasn't considered safe.
And that'll end up being a city jail or a county jail?
It's a county jail, but it's connected to the city's law enforcement center because it made sense that we do things together. So they expanded it a little bit, but it's really in the same footprint as the former one. And so they're working on that now. The other thing that really strikes me as really important for us is they had some rules having to do with needing sprinkler systems for duplexes and townhomes that are twin. And that shut off that market. We went from 64 permits one year to 2 the next year, and none the next year. And for me, twin homes, townhomes, those kind of things is a really good affordable housing venue for not only first-time buyers, but for those of us that are in a downsizing mode. And so we had a real gap of affordable homes in that. And so anyway, the sprinklers are not required. You can put the sprinklers in if you want, but they're not required now. And that was something that went through, and Governor Dayton did sign that bill also.
When you've been in office now, Your Honor, for 4 years, what thing that, whether it's a city issue, a county issue, or a 7th Congressional District issue, or a state of Minnesota issue that really frustrates you, that you'd like to see your constituents or anybody that gets to see this video that you'd like to see changed or improved in governance?
In governance.
I know it's a tough question, but we have the Trump crowd, we have the Bernie crowd, and I think both of them have valid issues, and I try to be in the middle as a true press person. Any thoughts on?
Well, one of the things I was active in was League of Women Voters.
Okay.
And so for me, transparency, getting information out is really important. And we talked about that in the city because we don't have any PR person in that respect, but on the other hand, it has more to do with how people learn about things. And the more we can do in that regard, so people know what's going on, they can express their feelings about things, which is one reason why I have a pretty active Facebook in particular, so that you can kind of get those kind of pieces of information out. When we have a media locally that is pretty focused on everything Fargo, it's hard to get that kind of information out.
Yes.
And so anything that we can do that makes things more transparent, makes more easily, readily known, that's important to me, and I think there's room to improve in that area. There's some entities that don't do, aren't involved in MCAM that could be. I mean, all of ours is live, and also you can watch it later, but I'd love to see the schools do that. I think it's not that they're trying to be not transparent. I think the elected people are anxious about being on TV. But frankly, I tried to explain. I said, once you do it, you don't even notice the camera. You're just in the moment of trying to do your work.
Yeah, excellent.
And if people can kind of hear and know what's going on, they'll give you input, which is good. Input always gives you an idea of what kinds of things are important or things you never thought of. And they would also be aware of things. Nobody likes to be surprised by things. They like to know what's going on.
You know, your mayor, I couldn't have asked for a better introduction in one of the topics I wanted to touch with you. And I believe the same. I believe our media empires, the forum communications type, the CBS Minneapolis now that used to be WCCO locally owned, and all these outlets become billionaires. And what I'm trying to do is just that, the transparency to see that low-income people have access to what the big people are really doing. And that was always one of my driving forces of doing a little media on the side, so to speak. And one of the frustrations I'm facing right now is I've got a transmitter sitting in Amina, North Dakota that covers this whole area that's been there since 2014. I tested it in the fall of 15, wherever I could get WDAY on the Minnesota side all the way down to Fergus Falls and up to Mahnomen and south to Breckenridge. I was on the air there. But public TV on the North Dakota side that has a tower out there gets over $500,000 a year from citizens of Minnesota. They also have a tower at Euclid that covers Thief River, Crookston, Grand Forks, East Grand Forks that I could easily be on. And I can't get North Dakota Public TV to cooperate with me because I did a story on public TV on one of the last days of my testing, and they didn't like it. And they want me to bring emergency alert system in. That's not a problem. But there's signals in this area that could have additional free TV over the air for people, and I know how to bring that into the area all over the state, all over North Dakota, South Dakota, and do that. And I can't get an appointment with Doug Bergram. I can't get an appointment with Mayor or Governor Dayton or the two senators on each side or the two congressmen on each side, and Kramer and Thune in South Dakota and Klobuchar here on the commerce committees. There's just a bunch of things going on in TV that are outrageous, and if you could help me in that process, rather than going on the Fargo side with an office, I would put it in the Moorhead side here, and because I, like you, believe that everybody has a right to see what's going on, but unless the common guy can flick channels when they get home and sitting in their easy chair, they get left out. And so if you can help me a little bit with that, I would really appreciate that.
Oh, okay. No, I gotta say, I don't know much about that. I know I remember when they changed the rules a little bit. I have a friend who has a station in Moorhead that usually does Latino or LGBT rights kind of programming, or frankly, New Americans, just a variety of groups that aren't necessarily have a venue to express their views.
And that's
so I was aware when that changed, so it was very interesting. But certainly not an expert on it. But
sure. And see, I'm a for-profit company, and I believe that freedom of the press is the only way a democracy works. And some of the venues that you're talking about are community TV, but I can't advertise on them or some of these other groups.
Gotcha.
And so see, by keeping me off the free airways on towers, I have no revenue source.
Oh, sure.
And another example I can give you quickly is in Mankato. I could be on there. There's a translator there right now that I could be on. The Commerce Committee, it's not a Republican-Democrat issue. They're going to shut off a big tower in the Alexandria Sock Center, Wilmer area, and they're going to give CCO and CBS $10 million to shut that off. I mean, if they would give me $2 million, I would cover most of North, South Dakota, and Minnesota. I know how to do it that efficiently, yet we face these issues when the common person or the elite that are doing things that they don't want even their elite friends to see, things like this happen. So that's my plug, and I hope to work with you a little after we do this shoot. But I want a good leader that came in. I'm going to do one term, do the best I can, and get out. That's what a government of the people, by the people, and for the people should be about. And at any rate, I guess I've taken over a half hour of your time. I don't know how much time you got left. We can let the camera run. There's some things I probably haven't brought up that you're thinking there. I'd like to talk about this, and you're welcome to do it, Mayor. Do you have some thoughts?
I'm fine. You know, there really is so many things rolling that I never have a specific thing. In fact, sometimes that's problematic because it's hard to focus on priorities if you have so many things rolling. But
one of the things that I'm also a firm believer in modernization of government. And when I look at our county system and I look at our state legislature on the Minnesota side that has 201 members, I think we could do a better job and get better people if we only had 100. We have 87 counties in Minnesota. I think you just mentioned, does your city have both Clay and some Wilkin County people within city limits, or they just come up to the edge of the south side of Moorhead?
As far as
the county structure, is the city of Moorhead totally?
We're all in Clay County.
That's what I thought you were centered
yep,
enough, but
yep.
you mentioned Wilkin County. That's the first one south?
I only mention them because they're impacted by the diversion.
Oh, okay,
And,
okay.
Often it'll be that group. Clay County is very involved in it, but Wilkin County also has some vocal thoughts about things, and of course we're all kind of all Minnesota.
What you talked about yourself leaning progressive. What are you doing, or what do you feel you're failing at, or just don't have the funds to help low-income people in your city?
Oh,
Give us some thoughts.
we could talk about that for a while.
That's what I want you to do.
For me, we need more affordable housing. That is something that's not enough here. And even, frankly, just Section 8 housing specifically, because there's enough people that have vouchers for Section 8, but cannot find a facility that takes that. And so they're not being utilized adequately. I think those are, the key pieces of it. As a community, we do a fair amount of things having to do with making sure groups have food where they need to have food. We had some areas that were of a food desert, as in there wasn't good, nutritious food, because you can say, well, they can go to there's a CVB or
Sure.
CVS near, but that isn't the kind of thing that people need to be able to do. We could be upping our transportation in ways that people have more options. For instance, we have no busing on Sundays.
Okay.
We are expanding this year Saturday ridership so that people can get where they need to get to. And people don't always think of it. They think of it as, that's your free time. But, for people that are struggling to get by, Saturdays and weekends are work.
Yes.
For them.
Totally.
And
I
so
totally
when you
agree.
don't have good, low-cost transportation options for them, that puts a problem in it for them.
And it also relates if they are out partying or whatever, they don't have that public transportation to get on. They get in a vehicle, and next thing you know, they got a DWI.
Which phases
and so all
everything
else.
of what you do, cab fare or whatever, other options when you have those kinds of things happen.
I didn't get a chance. Most cities have a some type of profile as far as what percentage of your income of your population. On the low side, what percentage of the population? Do you have any thoughts there, Mayor?
I hate to even hazard. I knew those a lot better before. I was a human rights commissioner before I was mayor, and so I did get very involved in poverty-related issues, just because that struck to my personal heart, although I've never personally been in poverty.
Now, on the healthcare issue, Clay County probably takes care of the health issues and are you tend to be happy with that? Do they have, like they do in Alexandria, there's 13 counties in kind of central Minnesota that has a program where Medicaid picks up all the costs of low-income people. Is that basically what you're aware of in Clay County here as well?
I have not heard as much in as far as the medical piece. What we do have gaps in is dental care.
Yes, yes, I agree.
And that's a huge issue. And I don't know that it's as much about not being paid for. Well, I suppose it is indirectly. But dentists that would be willing to provide it in a way that Medicaid would pick it up, or MNsure would pick it up. That's a real problem. We had, I forgot the group's name, that comes in and does a couple thousand people, and I volunteered at that. But that was one of the things I said, well, please come back. We could have you every year.
Exactly.
And people really appreciate that. I don't think people realize, those of us that have been very fortunate, realize what dental care means to somebody's life. If somebody doesn't have the potential of dental care, like I have 4 crowns, so you don't see empty teeth in my mouth, and when you get to this age, you're going to have some degree of that. But if you don't have dental care, what happens is the tooth falls out on its own, or maybe you're lucky enough that it gets pulled, but it's not an option that you put a crown in or any other kind of thing like that that saves it. Plus, you're not doing the kinds of care that you and I may do. We may get teeth cleanings twice a year.
And
people
everybody
that don't
should
have that. Those kinds of options, and when you become a person that has a tooth missing, your ability to be hired dramatically changes.
And your approach to your fellow man changes because you feel conscious of that gap.
I know a friend.
Depression sets in, drinking, drugs.
He would watch us smiling.
Yes.
Because he didn't want you to see that he was missing teeth.
I agree.
I mean, what kind of a life thing is that where you're going, well, I shouldn't get too, they'll see my teeth are missing. It's a quality of life, or even how to maintain your life. I remember a gentleman that told me, a fast food place in town here, who would not hire him, and they very pointedly talked about, this is for cleaning after hours at night.
Mm-hmm.
There's no public there whatsoever.
Yeah.
But they very pointedly said that I'm not going to hire you because you have teeth missing. And I thought, wow, how do they change that? That's a unsurmountable minor thing that most of us would never even think of in our lives.
And we're in a world where you either have insurance or it's cash up front.
Exactly.
And
not cash. And if you ever look at your insurance, like I was just in the hospital, right?
Yes.
And that was a $49,000 8-day trip, right? But I have good insurance. But when you look at the actual bills, the actual amount my insurance paid was something like $19,000. But when you're cash paying, you don't get that discount. You get the full amount. You pay it ahead. It's a totally different kind of lifestyle. And I think when you don't have that opportunity, you're not aware of how that impacts people.
And I've worked, I should be worth 30 to 50 million like the average big farmer in this area, but taking on the world and losing big time. And so I've been to the very top as well as the very bottom financially in society. And I've worked night shifts with immigrants and low-income people and people with health issues, with dental issues. And I was just shocked, and I had employed people for most of my life and had quite a few at times, and thought I knew about low-income people, but until you actually work and live with them, I worked some night shifts where people were gone week in and week out, and the only reason they were gone, they had a dental issue. And they didn't have the money to do that, take care of it, or they were so self-conscious of the
Mm-hmm.
dental issue. And then when they did come in some cases, varied men, women, whatever, they have such a mind-boggling toothache that they're just a bear cat to deal with, and their fellow employees. I mean, you almost become a bouncer in a facility to keep everybody working when the boss is in his little room doing computer work, and the floor's got to get something done, and there's
Mm-hmm.
chaos out there, especially with the night shift of the weekend. So,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm glad to hear that you are well aware of it, because I find there's mayors, there's legislators, there's congressional people that just don't grasp it. And one of the things that just blew me away of watching President Obama, who had been a neighbor organizer, when he came in, he said his main issue was health care, and he left out the dental part. And when you walk the neighborhoods, for young people, I would have first and foremost give them dental care, because if they have a good mouth and have a good diet and a good smile
for many years.
Exactly.
Till their 40s, 50s. I think I had my first crown when I was 40. And I suppose they all kind of differ, but you do good care in general, and teeth differ. Everybody has a genetic component to it, but it affects how you're perceived, your perception, and your employability. So even if you didn't care about people, the economics of it makes sense. Right?
What people will be wondering watching this, your big brother, big sister, whatever you want to call, to the west here, Fargo, how's your relationship, or how's the community relationship that way? Just some insights, some things that you think in your term have really been helpful, and others that, boy, we're like the Northern Ireland and Britain.
Really, actually, we get along really well. I've gotten along with the mayors all around. We do see each other really regularly. I find that you need to sort of speak up about your own city by all means, or you kind of be forgotten, but it makes sense that we do things together, because to most people it's just a river. It's more distinctly two states, but in this community it's just a river. And so we do a lot of things jointly. If we have a big fire over here, we all band together. If there's something that happens in Fargo, our people are down there. It's just, it makes sense that we have some degree of camaraderie, discussion, and sharing of needs.
Now, one of the other, I'm a graduate of the University of Minnesota at Crookston, and East Grand Forks, when I was up there back in the 60s and 70s, was quite a small town. Now that has grown bigger than Crookston, I believe.
Is it?
And,
Okay,
and so they've had some real growth and on East Grand Forks side. Do you do any work or close relationship with Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, that area much or not? Is that too far north for you?
You know, I don't know the mayor of East Grand.
Okay.
I've met the mayor of Grand Forks just because of meetings, but we do our border states legislation together with East Grand. There's five in Breckenridge. I've met with Mayor Moore in Breckenridge for
Okay.
a couple of things. In fact, we've done some political things having to do with LGA together. Because it just makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But not as much as you would think, truth be told. But border states legislation, we do.
And from a standpoint, there's, I think, a couple mayor organizations on the Minnesota side here. Does your city belong to both of those, or just one of them? The mayor of Alexandria, Sarah Carlson, is president of one of those groups. Does your city belong to that? Do you go to any of those meetings where she presides or not?
The one that she's part of is she's the current chair of the Coalition for Greater Minnesota Cities.
Okay.
And I'm also on that board. I'm
Okay.
very active. In fact, they're giving me some kind of award in August. I don't clue why they're doing that, but how sweet. But and then the other one is there's a mayor's association, and there's 800 and some cities,
And
so there
you
could be a
belong
lot
to
of them.
both of those
But I do
groups?
belong to both of them. I find it very useful to talk to other cities and compare notes.
Which group does the best job for the cities, you think? The bigger group or the more focused group?
Well, the
smaller?
mayor group is more, I want to say, more social
Okay.
in some respects. We connect and we compare notes, and we have some information. So we really just meet once a year. The Coalition of Greater Minnesota really does heavy lobbying for cities that are not the Twin Cities. And I do a lot of things with that one in particular. When legislation was looking a little iffy for a while there, we did a press conference together to sort of stress that we needed certain things to actually happen this year. And specifically, the LGA funds need to be upped in some kind of way that makes things equitable around the state. And so
We're getting close to almost an hour of your time on this Saturday, the 24th of June, and in Sauk Center, where I spent the night, it was only 51 degrees this morning. So
That's
it's
cool.
a good morning for us to talk. But my audience, I'm sure, will be wondering, when it comes to dealing with congressional people, what frustration do you as a mayor here have that you wish your congressional delegation could do more for you? Any particular item that, boy, I would like this particular help from my city, or for East Grand Forks, or for West Fargo, or whatever, that they tend to not grasp the issue?
They've been pretty responsive anytime I've had conversations. The train safety piece was really interesting to me, in that I could tell they don't feel like they have any control over that. the railways have been here and have a really strong hold on that. And I found that interesting and sort of frustrating, and I'm sure they do too. But our congressional people here have been really responsive about giving us time to talk about what we need and helping us in some ways. It's just some things just don't happen as well.
You know, one of the issues on the trains, it baffles me why they haven't come with bypasses for a through route to a metropolitan area like Fargo, Moorhead, because I think it's done because I would like, you get me on this tower west of town, and I would like to do some real research as far as how much cargo and trains really stop here to benefit the community more so compared to just going through on the Burlington Northern. And
well, decades ago, there was discussion about, going around. When they were talking about the safety issues about going through town, they did, and this is way before my time. I don't even think I lived in Moorhead then. But they did work at that, but that didn't go anywhere. And probably in the same ways that if it didn't benefit the railways, they had no interest in it. And then they obviously have more power than Congress does.
And then on a
interesting.
statewide issue, is there is it transportation funding, or what type of help would you like to have seen from the legislature that not putting a finger on your own people here, so to speak, but the Minnesota, the people in St. Paul that could or should be doing a particular help to cities like Moorhead and outstate cities in general that you...
That didn't happen?
That didn't happen.
The LGA thing was a key thing. That one,
And when you say LGB, if somebody just turns on a TV, what were you talking about LG?
It's a way of giving funds to cities to make us all equitable in some ways, depending.
The border state cities.
Not necessarily, but all around greater Minnesota.
And what does that stand for, Your Honor?
It is, now you're going to make me gap.
Okay.
In fact, I usually don't use acronyms if I can help it, except the only reason I did is I could.
But you'll catch it, but what you're saying, the type of funding or help?
It's a way of, so we all send in sales tax money, right?
Right.
Right, and so it's a way of sending it back in a way that could sort of evenly distribute it so that a town like Edina, who does not have problems raising property, funds through their property taxes, and people don't blink an eye at any of that, versus a town that really struggles but to maintain their roads, basic things like a police force, safety, kind of basic things, not the niceties like parks and stuff, but just basics. And so they have an equation of how they would bring it back to cities so that we're all in sort of an even kind of keel kind of way. Well, the number has not went down at a certain point in 2002, and we've been trying to get it back to 2002's level. That doesn't even involve inflationary amounts or anything, just the actual dollar amount it was in that year. And so that we can kind of do our work easier from one community to the next community.
Now, one of the things that hospital services, do they tend to all be on the Fargo side? Sanford just built a huge new hospital. You had said, unfortunately, you had spent some time in the hospital.
Moorhead does not have a hospital.
Okay.
We did at one time many, many years, decades ago. My kids were born in Fargo because that's where the hospital was. And they're in their 20s now. But we do have multiple types of medical facilities here that are clinics.
Sure.
We do have that, but not actual hospitals.
And so it is now with the new building, is Sanford the dominant hospital, or were they always that? Or what is the other hospital chains in there?
Essentia is probably the other key one for a hospital, and yeah, so it's just the
It's those two.
Yeah.
And from
there
a-
used to be more. There used to be more.
And does the community or yourself believe that the size of the new Sanford Hospital was definitely needed, or do they have a lot of expansion or empty beds for quite some time, you think?
No, I gotta admit, I had not heard that they were having empty beds or too full of beds, for that matter. But I think Sanford, as an entity, as a whole entity, wanted to develop a place that was comparable to Mayo.
Okay.
And their vision was that it would be in Fargo. And so that's why the size of it is so huge, is because their intent is to have a large research component to it in the long run.
Now, you guys had, we're going to run out of film time, so that's how you're going to get a break, Your Honor. You've been very kind and very interesting. When it came to the stadium issue, you used to have a key representative that was heavily involved in a stadium. It starts with an L, but I can't think of his name.
Maury Lanning, and he was a mayor for like 17 years.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And so from a standpoint, he decided not to run. Did he receive a lot of negative impact because of the stadium, or it?
You know, I'm not too sure. I think he thinks that of as his final accomplishment.
Okay.
So I think he feels pretty proud of that.
And is he available to you when to consult? Do you ever have coffee or?
We have a couple of
a
times.
lunch or?
I probably spend more time with Mark Voxlin, who was the 12 years before me.
Okay.
Maury has been out of the mayor piece for a while, and so doesn't keep up on it. But he and I connect every now and then. He's on the Red River Basin Commission, of which I am also on, as a Winnipeg, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota. So the 4 general areas that have the Red River Basin. We try to do things collaboratively and sort of plan together, and it's a really good group to be a part of. And Maury was very active in it when he was mayor, and now that he's retired, he's in fact recently back on that board.
And my audience will also be thinking now, you're going to go out of office in about a year.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some people chomping at the bit to take your job, or run, I should say, not take your job, but be the next mayor? Or is
Nobody
it kind of
that-
tough to get somebody to run?
No, nobody is officially announced. But
Okay.
I've heard speculation and sort of talk, but I think there will be a fairly good sized amount of people running.
And as we get down to 3 minutes on my SD card, the way it looks here, and I think that'll be a full hour, maybe a little more. Your own background a little more as we close. Where were you raised? Where were you educated? Maybe
Sure.
same for your husband, children, whatever.
I was born and raised in Minot, North Dakota.
Okay.
We got married in '81. He went to NJSU but moved to Minot for his first engineering degree job.
Okay.
We met down there, and then moved to this area, and then I got into public accounting. I have 2 children. My youngest just graduated from college. He'll be an engineer also, and is just going off to his first job in New York State.
Okay.
So, and my daughter works for the library system in West Fargo and enjoys that, and that was kind of her end goal too. So.
Mayor, I'm Alan Roebke, Inform TV, and it's been an incredible pleasure of mine to interview you, and I hope we can talk politics and good governance in the future and kind of spread the word with the Fargo side. And if you talk to Mayor Dayton or Governor Doug Burgum, I want to put a forum both here and in this region to see that good people like yourself, and whether it's industry, politics, religion, or whatever, have a place to see the people are informed. Thank you very much,
Sure.
Mayor.
Well, Thank you, Al.